Ignition sequence starts.
Good morning and welcome to Mission Control Houston and the International Space Station Flight Control Room. This is where there's a team of specialists on duty around the clock to monitor station systems and work with the Expedition 59 crew members as they go through the tasks on their daily agenda. Laboratory science has been a primary job this week, as the crew has monitored progress in a number of experiments. That includes an investigation into how space radiation damages DNA and how cells repair themselves in microgravity.
Welcome to Space to Ground. I'm Kayla LaFrance. This week, astronauts on board the space station researched damaged DNA. NASA astronaut Nick Hague spent time working inside the Columbus Laboratory module with the Genes in Space 6 experiment, which is exploring how space radiation damages DNA and how the cell repair mechanism works in microgravity. Increased exposure to radiation can affect long-term health, with DNA damage linked to the increased risk of cancer and other degenerative diseases. Genes in Space 6 will study the DNA repair mechanisms that cells use by inducing DNA damage and assessing mutation and repair at the molecular level. An increased understanding of how cells repair DNA damage while in microgravity can contribute to future methods to protect astronauts on the space station and future missions to the moon and beyond. Genes in Space is a competition for students in grades 7 through 12 to design a DNA experiment that addresses challenges in space travel and deep space exploration. It's just one of the many ways that students can directly benefit from the International Space Station. For more information, go to genesinspace.org or head over to nasa.gov/STEMOnStation to look for more opportunities. This week's question comes from Matthew DeFrancesco, who wants to know if astronauts get medical care when they return to Earth. The answer is yes. All astronauts have a flight surgeon assigned to them. These flight surgeons support them pre-flight, during the mission, and post-flight. At the landing site, flight surgeons take the crew members to the medical tent to check their vital signs and provide any needed treatment. The NASA astronauts start the journey back to Houston that same day, accompanied by their flight surgeons, who will then support any medical tests and recovery programs to ensure that the crew members are readapting to Earth's gravity. Keep sending in your questions using the hashtag AskNASA. We'll see you next week.
"59 expeditions have served on the International Space Station since the year 2000, and there are more to come. And all of them have worked together to achieve scientific goals while getting humankind ready for the next step in space exploration. And that is moving out beyond low Earth orbit, to return to the moon by 2024, and then out into the solar system, to Mars. NASA is building the systems right now that will take us to our next destination.
50 years ago, we pioneered a path to the moon. The trail we blazed cut through the fictions of science and showed us all what was possible.
It's very pretty out here.
Today, our calling to explore is even greater. To go farther, we must be able to sustain missions of greater distance and duration. We must use the resources we find at our destinations. We must overcome radiation, isolation, gravity, and extreme environments like never before. These are the challenges we face to push the bounds of humanity. We're going to the moon to stay by 2024, and this is how.
This all starts with the ability to get larger, heavier payloads off-planet and beyond Earth's gravity.
For this, we designed an entirely new rocket.
The Space Launch System. SLS will be the most powerful rocket ever developed.
And with components in production
and more in testing,
this system is capable of being the catalyst for deep space missions.
We need a capsule
that can support humans from launch
through deep space and return safely back to Earth.
For this, we've built Orion.
This is NASA's next generation human space capsule. using data from lunar orbiters that continue to reveal the moon's hazards and resources.
We're currently developing an entirely new approach to landing and operating on the moon.
Using our commercial partners to deliver science instruments and robotics to the surface, we are paving the way for human missions in 2024.
Our charge is to go quickly and to stay, to press our collective efforts forward with a fervor that will see us return to the moon in a manner that is wholly different than 50 years ago.
We want lunar landers that are reusable,
that can land anywhere on the lunar surface. The simplest way to do so is to give them a platform in orbit around the moon from which to transition.
An orbiting platform to host deep space experiments and be a waypoint for human capsules. We call this lunar outpost Gateway.
The beauty of the Gateway is that it can be moved between orbits.
It will balance between the Earth and Moon's gravity,
in a position that is ideal for launching even deeper space missions.
In 2009, we learned that the moon contains millions of tons of water ice.
This ice can be extracted and purified for water. It can be separated in oxygen for breathing or hydrogen for rocket fuel.
The moon is quite uniquely suited
to prepare us and propel us to Mars and beyond.
This is what we are building.
This is what we're training for.
This we can replicate throughout the solar system.
This is the next chapter of human space exploration.
Humans are the most fragile element of this entire endeavor, and yet we go for humanity. We go to the moon and on to Mars to seek knowledge and understanding and to share it with all. We go knowing our efforts will create opportunities that cannot be foreseen. We go because we are destined to explore and see it with our own eyes. We turn towards the moon now, not as a conclusion, but as preparation, as a checkpoint toward all that lies beyond. Our greatest adventures remain ahead of us. We are going.
We're going.
We are going.
We are going. We're going.
The International Space Station is part of a wide group of NASA programs that are working to develop the systems that will be needed for future human exploration of space. NASA's Human Research Program is doing research and technology development on ways to enable people to live and work safely and effectively in space over long periods of time. One of the most challenging aspects of sending human beings out beyond low Earth orbit is dealing with space radiation.
For the journey to Mars, the Human Research Program works to project, assess, and solve the problems that astronauts have in space. Specifically for radiation research, the Human Research Program works to predict and mitigate the health effects of space radiation on astronauts.
I think one of the most challenging parts for the journey to Mars in terms of the humans and not necessarily the technology to get there is the risk of radiation exposure and the in-flight consequences of the exposure to radiation as well as the long-term health consequences of exposure.
There's two parts of radiation we have to protect the crew from. One is a solar particle event, where there's a solar storm and these energetic particles stream out. Fortunately, we know how to protect the crew from that. We put them into a shelter that's shielded by lots of water. And actually, they're very short duration, hours to days at most. They can come out and continue with their journey. That's the one aspect of radiation we know how to protect against. The other, which we really don't have a firm handle on, is galactic, cosmic rays. These are highly energetic particles that come from all over the galaxy towards the solar system and Earth. You can't shield against these. They're so energetic, they rip right through all metals, all plastic, all water, and all cellular material. And as they rip through these materials, little electrons and protons pull off of them, and you end up getting a cascade effect of radiation throughout the materials. And sometimes going through certain materials causes a worse radiation environment for the crew than had it gone through other materials. So we try to design the spacecraft out of materials that shield the crew from these, but also do not produce more hazardous particles as a function of being impacted with it. So a lot of people think that radiation will keep NASA from sending people to Mars, and that's not what the current situation is. We have techniques, we've discussed ways of getting there faster. We know that we add these various mitigations up, that we can have a successful Mars mission, a healthy crew, and have them live a very long and productive life after their return to Earth.
The International Space Station is about preparing America and its partners for those future missions, but it's also about advancing spaceflight right now through the promotion of commercialization, both commercial crew and cargo vehicles, but also commercial research and utilization of space. And one good example of that is Alpha Space. That's the company responsible for developing the Missy flight facility.
Alpha Space was formed in 2015 and really is a product of this new commercialization in low Earth orbit. It was formed specifically to create a commercial payload that would be available in space for private industry. The Missy dates to the early 2000s, was the first mission. It's been utilized by NASA, by the Department of Defense for different experiments. And then around 2010, NASA put out a call for ideas to privatize portions of the space station. And so we responded with a proposal to that, and that's how we ended up with our cooperative agreement. For material scientists who want to test their materials or components in a harsh environment, the Missy platform really offers the most harsh environment that's available, and that's external to the space station. Previous Missies were one-time use, sort of suitcase style. They would open up and expose these materials to space. The Missy platform is a permanent platform that's all robotically serviceable, commandable from the ground from our operations center here. We don't only test materials, we can also do technical demos, we can test circuitry, computer boards, cameras, and its serviceability and changeability allows science to continuously happen for 10 years going forward. Every day, new commercial companies are coming into the fold of this new economy that's developing. I think the space station is a great platform to start commercialization, and I think platforms like the Missy are going to drive a new demand in space.
Those Missy experiments are there where they are, in part, to catch what may be flying through space by the space station. Orbital debris poses a risk to spacecraft, too. And the International Space Station has a debris impact sensor to provide information on the orbital debris environment in low Earth orbit. By monitoring impacts caused by small-scale material floating in the area, this space debris sensor will generate a better estimate of the amount of stuff out there that could help better define shielding requirements for future spacecraft. Being able to identify microbes aboard the International Space Station in real time was a revolutionary goal for the world of microbiology and space exploration. And the Genes in Space team turned that possibility into a reality when it completed the first ever sample-to-sequence process entirely on orbit. This advance could aid in the ability to diagnose and treat astronaut ailments in real time, or benefit other experiments aboard the station, and maybe assist in the identification of DNA-based life on other planets.
So then we kind of went for the home run experiment, which is actually trying to get a sample that originated on the ISS.
And the goal was really to show that you could go all the way from a sample to an answer all on board.
I am going to do this really neat experiment today. Last week we took some surface samples, microbial surface samples. There'll be enough DNA after we magnify it to sequence it. And then from that sequence, then we can determine what type of bacteria it is. So it's going to be really exciting for us, I think, to try and do this for the first time all on board the space station.
In that moment, she's in the microgravity science glove box as she's collecting those cells. My heart was just pounding because what she did had never been done.
Our DNA cake is in the PCR oven. We'll look forward to getting lots and lots of DNA from each of those 3 little bacteria colonies.
They're like, we can just patch your cell phone in to the space to ground loops and you can just talk to Peggy on your cell phone to do this. There's a hurricane raging literally outside, but the folks in Marshall, they're on it. They're gonna make this happen. Science on station is not stopping because of Hurricane Harvey. And right away, we saw one microorganism pop up and then a second one. And I thought, oh my gosh, I am watching the first sequences ever of an unknown from space.
I checked several times. Like I ran like a biochemical test and then I ran 2 different sequencing tests. We are 100% sure that our samples that we got back on the ground are exactly the same that we got on orbit. We did it. Everything worked perfectly.
As a microbiologist, my goal is really to that when we go and we move beyond ISS and we're headed towards Mars or the moon or wherever we're headed to, we have a process that the crew can have that great understanding of the environment based on molecular technology.
The laboratories of the International Space Station aren't the only places on the vehicle where scientific research takes place. The outside of the station is home to a number of experiments, including the Total and Spectral Solar Irradiance Sensor. This experiment is continuing NASA's decades-long work of gathering important data to help researchers who are investigating changes to Earth's climate.
Follow the sun. Presented by Science at NASA. The sun. It inspires songs, warms us, and grows our food. Life on land and in the oceans, the daily weather, and long-term climate patterns happen primarily because of the energy we receive from our closest star. Even tiny variations in that energy can affect the workings of our planet's atmosphere. NASA uses instruments to follow the sun and monitor the amount of solar energy coming to us. The latest instrument to do so the Total and Spectral Solar Irradiance Sensor, TSIS-1, makes those measurements with unprecedented accuracy. TSIS gathers information from its perch aboard the International Space Station, or the ISS. Flying on the platform that the orbiting laboratory provides has allowed TSIS to continue NASA's 40-year record of tracking the sun's radiant energy, one of the longest and most important climate data records gathered from space. Over the past several decades, Earth's ice mass has diminished, sea levels have risen, drought and precipitation patterns have changed, and growing seasons have shifted. To understand the causes, including human influences, of these changes, and to refine the models used to simulate Earth's climate, researchers must know the amount of incoming solar energy. Peter Paluski, TSIS lead mission scientist, explains, when there's a balance between incoming energy from the sun and the infrared radiation Earth emits, climate remains steady. An imbalance means energy is either being stored in the system, causing temperature increases, or lost, causing temperature decreases. Energy from the sun makes up half of the balance equation. Even though the measurement record shows that the sun's solar energy output has not had a major influence in recent climate change, that output needs to be monitored continuously. It is arguably the most important variable we need to know to understand climate, says Paluski. Trying to understand climate without measuring the sun's input is like trying to balance your checkbook without knowing your income. Climate is measured over long time spans, decades to centuries and longer, unlike weather that changes over small time scales. To be able to connect measurements over long time periods, continuity and accuracy are key. TSIS has two sensors. The Total Irradiance Monitor, as its name suggests, measures all of the radiant energy from the sun, and the Spectral Irradiance Monitor measures how that energy is distributed over ultraviolet, visible, and infrared wavelengths. The latter helps scientists understand where in the atmosphere solar energy is being absorbed. For example, TSIS spectral irradiance measurements of the sun's ultraviolet radiation are critical to understanding the ozone layer. Ozone in the stratosphere absorbs ultraviolet light. This heats the stratosphere and drives changes in atmospheric wind flow that can propagate down to the lower atmosphere and impact climate. So many factors influence Earth's climate, says Paluski. We need to continue learning how they all interact. TSIS is helping us characterize the sun's behavior and how Earth's atmosphere responds to the sun. For more science from the International Space Station, go to www.nasa.gov/ISS-science. To continue following our closest star, visit science.nasa.gov.
International Space Station crew members are subjects of some of the onboard research as scientists learn more about how being in space impacts human health. And that includes studying how the crew members establish a routine for sleep. That's a key component of their ability to function to the best of their ability. In this demonstration video, astronaut Ricky Arnold talks about some of the problems with sleep in space and shows us how the astronauts are overcoming them.
Hi, my name is Ricky Arnold on the International Space Station. We get asked a lot, how do we sleep in space? And it's a great question because we all know how important a good night's sleep is. If you're not getting a good night's sleep, you can count on reduced cognitive function, poorer reaction times, and maybe just being a little grumpy. And up here in space, just like on Earth, those are things we all want to avoid. So, we go around the Earth about every 90 minutes, which means we get 16 sunrises and sunsets a day. So how we sleep is a really good question because the sun's always getting ready to come up or it's getting ready to set, and we use those cues on Earth to let us know when it's time to begin our day and when it's time to end our day.
Ricky is talking about circadian rhythm. It's the body's natural regulator for sleep and wake cycles based on a 24-hour schedule. Those 16 sunrises and sunsets he mentioned can cause circadian misalignment and sleep deficiencies during long-duration spaceflight. The hazards of lost sleep can range from poor attention at school to on-the-job errors to long-term sleep loss, even chronic disease. Sleep is super important. Hey Ricky, what are you doing on the space station to get some sleep?
Well, here in space, we kind of have to do it artificially. So we have these nice crew quarters. It's about the size of a refrigerator. It's very quiet. The space station can be a little noisy, but it's very quiet in here. And we can control light with a light switch. If we are just middle of the day, we have a light like you're seeing right now, which is just this kind of standard lighting. It's getting close to the end of the evening. You want to dim the light a little bit, kind of for the end of the evening. Or if you're going to be up late and you need to keep awake, we have a really bright light setting. The other thing we have is off. You see how dark it got. Another challenge sleeping on the International Space Station, sleeping in microgravity is really nice because you can just float and stretch out and it's really comfortable. The problem is with the air currents in the International Space Station, you could very well float into a piece of hardware and hit your head, or worse yet, even break something. So we got our sleeping bag here, just almost like a sleeping bag on Earth. But as you can see, we have bungee cords that help hold us up against the wall, so I almost sleep standing up. And also, I do have a pillow. It's just a bag full of clothes, but I actually keep it up on the top of my head because I'm a little tall. In the crew quarters, I tend to hit my head on the ceiling when I'm sleeping. So I got my sleeping bag here. I got my bungee cords to hold me in. And then when it's time to go to bed, it's quite easy. Just unzip the sleeping bag, climb on under the bungee cord, climb into the sleeping bag, make sure you're nice and secure, zip yourself up, plan on getting a good night's sleep so I have good reaction times, my cognitive ability is what it should be, and that I'm not grumpy in the morning. So with that, I'm all set. Good night from the ISS.
If you'd like to get another look at any of the stories that we featured today, you can. Check us out on YouTube and Facebook. There are the addresses right there on the screen. And while you're there, look around, because there are lots of other cool things you can find there about NASA and America's human spaceflight program. Also, while you're out on the internet, check out Houston, We Have a Podcast. That's folks here at NASA talking about their work in all aspects of space exploration. We post new episodes every Friday. Today, we bring you a cool discussion about space medicine, past, present, and future. It features real NASA flight surgeons and an astronaut, and Gates McFadden, who portrayed Star Trek's Dr. Beverly Crusher. Go to nasa.gov/podcasts for today's episode, as well as the full library of all the NASA podcasts, all of which you can also listen to on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and SoundCloud. And remember to join NASA Television and NASA.gov this coming Wednesday, May 29th, the next spacewalk on the International Space Station. Expedition 59 Commander Oleg Kononenko and Flight Engineer Alexei Ovchinin will be headed out the door. Our coverage starts at 10:15 a.m. Houston time on Wednesday morning. That EVA is scheduled to begin at 10:44. This is Mission Control, Houston.